you better get out there and you better be overt about it, because if not, every conspiracy theorist will come out and try to dig down deep and do these interesting connections between what's happening in the valley and what's happening in the Beltway. So it was overt. It was decided to be overt and to be very public on the first day of launch, which led to an interesting story. They get a deal with In-Q-Tel. They get immediately into revenue. They don't take too much of the equity, and they'll do all the diligence for us. So that became the beautiful cycle, right? Companies would pitch us, VCs would pitch us, we would communicate the problem set. If we liked it, they would go thumbs up because they knew that the feds liked it, means there's a revenue source, and the stuff was good. If we reject it, then they kind of go, particularly if it was like something like cybersecurity, we said, well, we're not making that investment. I mean, I don't know if you guys want to. They go, thank you very much. Here's the next one. And so that's how we got the problem set and how it got to work. And then we would then find a customer in the building that was related to that problem in the first place and pay that customer to take that technology in and use it in an operational way. That's how Palantir got started. I mean, Palantir was this Peter Thiel and Alex basically meeting with me and saying, we got these algorithms on fraudulent transactions. We think there might be some value for the intelligence community. We brainstormed. They came back, and I kind of said on the blackboard, it needs to kind of look like this. The team went away and did a mock-up in 2 weeks, and then immediately we took that team and put them inside the building to work on what we call a CT counter-terrorist problem. And they just learned that business, and that became Palantir, and Palantir is worth somewhere between $10 or $20 billion today. Because the counter-terrorist problem is the same problems that banks have in fraudulent transactions and any other kind of fraudulent transaction. And Falcon came about because we were at a West Coast Computer Fair in 1978, and all my non-Asian frat brothers decided to go have lunch. So we're sitting there, and this group of contingents of Japanese executives show up, thinking that we were Japanese Americans. We didn't want to tell them we were not, but so we kind of faked it. And then they say, hey, we're looking for developers to develop software for a new computer that we're planning to launch in Japan. And it turned out that group of Chinese executives came from a company called ASCII Microsoft of Japan. And I got my first contracts to actually develop games for the Japanese Microsoft standard called the MSX. And the lead product manager, I was on the Tokyo train, and he loved airplanes, right? So he's one of those guys who had every single magazine about every single fighter jet in his bag. He pulls this out and he gives me an F-15 magazine about the F-15. He goes, you think you can build one of these as a simulator on the MSX? And because we've got a lot more memory now, we have 16K of memory. 16K. I said, wow, 16K, that's pretty good, but I can't do the F-15 HUD because I can't do the pull lines. I can do the F-16 because it's a simpler HUD. So why don't we just do the F-16 instead? So I wrote my first program for my friends. We published it in Japan. It became a hit, and that was the first generation. It showed up in the US as a Sega cart. But it was great. I mean, I had to go in and learn everything there was to know about airplanes and what you could do on an 8K machine.
Another hit game that was developed was Tetris, which you first licensed from its Soviet creator in 1987. Yeah. Were there some negotiations with the Soviet government as well on that, or
dealing with the Russians?
This class is Silicon Valley and the U.S. government, so government.
The difference between negotiating the rights for Tetris is not that different than negotiating a nuclear disarmament treaty with them. Right? It's kind of really interesting. What happened to us was this. We were sitting around at the Consumer Electronics Show, and typically you have these guys who scurry around looking for interesting games from abroad and try to get the rights and then license them into the US by selling it to a game publisher. And so they showed us this game, and it was Tetris, and I loved it. I said, this is great. And the agent was saying, hey, look, everybody's turned down this game because, Brother Bun turned down the game, EA turned down the game, Sega turned down the game because, it was a stupid game, right? The graphics were awful, nobody dies, bad sound, right? And I kind of go, yeah, but it's really addicting. I really kind of like this game. And I said, but I want to make some changes. I need to talk to the programmers. And the agent kind of looks at me. He goes, well, we got a problem here. I go, what's the problem? He goes, well, the programmers are in the Soviet Union. So I turned to my partner, Phil Adams. I said, get the rights. Put it in a red box with a hammer and sickle and get it out in the next 6 months, because I had heard through the rumor mill that there was going to be the very first set of talks between the Soviet Union and the US, and it would be between Reagan and Gorbachev. So I said, get the game rights, right? And if this thing actually comes to you, we're going to launch the game during the talks. And that's what we did, right? We launched the game during the talks. We even hired a fake Gorbachev and a fake Ronald Reagan lookalike. And we were running ads in the USA Today that says, because there'll be the headlines, Gorbachev meets with Reagan, and going through all the issues around nuclear proliferation. And then on the back of the page will be our ad with the fake Reagan and Gorbachev saying what they were really doing during the secret summits. They were playing Tetris. My parent company at that time, we were owned by the Maxwell Corporation. And my not particularly smart sister company in England decided to trade the rights of Tetris for Blasteroids. Like, who cares about Blasteroids? It's an awful game. So what they did was they renegotiated the rights in Japan and then went back to Russia and get the Russians to say that the original contract was void, and which would allow them to get the rights directly to Nintendo. Right, and basically null and voiding the original contract that we have, because their claim was the agency that we were dealing with didn't have the rights to negotiate it, and they were kind of making up the rules as they went along. It all worked out in the end, because at least I got my rights protected, because it was, again, the Japanese were good to me, but the other guys got all cut out. Atari got cut out, and the game became a big hit. And the reason why it became a big hit was because it was the first game to ship packed in with the first generation Game Boy. In fact, there's some pictures of Hillary Clinton playing Tetris. She was a hardcore Tetris player. She had her own Game Boy, and she would endlessly play it. So there's actually a picture, you look it up on the internet, for playing on a Game Boy on an airplane playing Tetris.
But what I'm really curious about is, how did you jump from all of that in the gaming sector to running In-Q-Tel?
So, my company got bought by Hasbro. Right? We went public, did the classic thing, and then Hasbro came in and bought the company. And I was also on the board of another company called Wizards of the Coast, who produced a game called Magic the Gathering, and then we got the rights for Pokemon, and then we published that, and then Pokemon went crazy, just like Pokemon Go's gone crazy today. Same story, just one was about paper, another one was about your cell phone. So I was the chief creative officer at Hasbro. That's what happened. After the company got bought, they said, we want you to be our chief creative officer and set up our online strategy for all of Hasbro. And I got to tell you, that is the best job in the world. The chief creative officer of a toy company. I was Tom Hanks in the movie Big, right? They paid me a lot of money to go, this toy sucks, right? Or, I look at this furry toy that basically talked, and it's called the Furby, and I go, this is going to be the hottest thing since sliced bread, right? We got to get the Furby, we got to get that product, and then we got to get the Star Wars rights. We had these little painted characters, and we sold them for tons of money. We sold $1 billion worth of Star Wars. Was a terrible movie, but great characters. We had really good painting on those characters. It went crazy. So I was having the time of my life, right? They bought my company. They bought the second company I was on the board of for a large, obscene sum of money back in those days. And I was going to set up their online division. So Hasbro said, okay, look, we'll put together the plan. We're going to do what they called a tracking stock in those days. We were going to create a stock that would be publicly listed side by side Hasbro, that will be the digital media of Hasbro. And they said, we'll make you the number 2 of that company, which you can't get a better job than that, right? And I don't have to be a public CEO anymore. I don't have to worry about all this stuff. I have fun. So Hasbro gets a call from Fortune magazine, and Fortune says, hey, look, do you have any fighter pilots in your senior executive ranks? Because we're going to do this kind of cute article about who's the top gun in public companies, and we got all these former military fighter pilots, right? And we're going to go and spend a day.
Fighter pilots in the class.
Right. Cool. So we're going to take them, we're going to put them in T-34s over Atlanta and dogfight and see who was the best guy, right? And has to go, so we don't have any fighter pilots, but we did buy this game company, right, that did this flight simulator. And they go, the writer goes, oh, that's perfect, right? Gamer versus fighter pilot, right? And I was the gamer, so. Alan Hasselfeld calls me up and goes, Gilman, we need you to go to the land. I represent Hasbro. Don't crash the plane. right. And at that time, my game became a pretty big hit. Falcon 4, a lot of the military guys were using it. In fact, Falcon 4 was designed originally as a trainer, but we didn't win the contract with the Department of Defense because they said they can't give a contract to a bunch of gamers. So we lost the contract, and I just published the game, and then we made millions of dollars. So many more copies than trainers out there. But so the fighter pilots at the Virginia Air National Guard basically put me in the backseat of the F-16, right? Taught me how to cheat during a dogfight. They would say, you know, if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying, right? So, you know, they taught me all the tricks of how to unload the plane right before the merge, right? And how to get the jump on the other guy. So, here I am, I'm in Atlanta in these T-34s. I have a fighter weapons school pilot who's the guy who's supposed to take it off and land so I don't kill myself, since I'm not a licensed pilot. But I had enough, some time, right? Real military, some time. So I take my controls, and the first guy I had to go against was the head of Heydrich and Struggles Federal Group. And he was an F-15 reservist, brigadier general, former A-1 decorated pilot, right? So if anybody knows anything about airplanes, an A-1 is not that different than the T-34, except that the A-1 has a lot more power, right? And the fighter weapons school guy is F-14 driver, right? Who is not used to an underpowered aircraft, you know, he's not used to bleeding off all that energy in a turn. So I go up, right, first time, do left, I'm dead in 34 seconds, right? And I go up again against Randy, I'm dead in 28 seconds, which is the way it's supposed to be. You know, he's an A-1 pilot and I fly video games. Then the fighter weapons school guy tried to take out Randy, and he was current, but you know, even though he got behind Randy, he could never get into the actual, into the sight. So you just see Randy smiling, laughing. I mean, we're so close, right? Because we're on guns. And then it came time for me to fly against the president of Bombardier, who's a Canadian F-1 pilot. So I ate his lunch. I did a maneuver he totally did not expect, right? And did a snapshot, got him out. And then we land, and then suddenly Randy takes my tape. And, you know, and so I go home. Then I get a phone call from Randy, and Randy goes, hey, you know, I'm recruiting for this job, and, you know, you might be really interested. I go, I'm not looking for a job. You can't get a better job. I'm the toy guy. He goes, no, you'll like this job, right? I said, okay, just send me this stuff over, right? Because, you know, he's an F-15 driver. I got to listen to what he has to say. So Randy sends to me this white paper, and it's titled The Corporation. Right? And everything in this is in code words. Right? The corporation, the activity, the engagement, right? I mean, it's like reading a spy novel. And I said, well, who wrote this thing, right? It doesn't say anything. He goes, well, you know, we need to have a meeting. Can you come to Washington? We'll give you a little more insight. So I go to Washington. And then he tells me this job is for the CIA. They had this idea that they're going to create something. They didn't know what the thing was, but they were trying to solve a problem. The problem they were trying to solve was how to get technology companies who historically has never engaged with the federal government to actually provide technologies, particularly in the IT space, that the government can leverage, because they were really afraid of what they called at that time the prospects of a digital Pearl Harbor. But in 1999, because the community got so good at collecting data, but not necessarily that good at processing all the data, that their biggest fear that there was going to be a new attack somewhere in the world, maybe even on the mainland. And in inspection, they would find that we had all the data necessary to warn of the attack. So, Director of CIA had a meeting with the head of S&T. S&T is Science and Technology Directorate. The first meeting took place underneath Director Deutsch. And at the time, this person by the name of Ruth David, who ran the S&T mission inside the agency, said, I think we need to come up with a different way to engage with the technology providers. And the technology providers that would prevent this attack probably does not live in defense contractors, the historical place that we go to buy really cool stuff, spy gear, data processing, IT. It doesn't live in places like Lockheed Martin, SAIC, and Booz Allen. It lives in places like Yahoo. It lives in places like the kid at Stanford working on the next new search technology. It lives in places like Berkeley, where the kid's working on the next new math models. It's at every place but the places that we go to. And quite frankly, we have no access to those companies or those entrepreneurs. And we don't even know how to speak their language. We show
class and that the flight was fairly light, not very many past 35 people aboard. So he may well be able to take a proactive part in that and what they intended to do and target. I certainly hope so anyway.
Ms. Hoagland, I hate interviews like this at this moment, and I'm sure you are suffering in ways that we cannot imagine. Did your son say anything else to you about the circumstances on board the flight?
No, I wasn't able to. He was cut off. Can you hear me all right?
I can indeed.
The plane, the phone went dead after a few seconds. I got the impression that he was being distracted badly by something going on around him. I didn't hear anything except the sort of confusion. I didn't hear any explosions, any yelling, just voices, and then he seemed quite distracted about something. Quite calm voice, though. He was a very close fellow, and then he repeated that he loved us. He emphasized to me that what he was telling me was true. I told him I believed him, that we loved him, and the phone went dead. But I have been asked since. We immediately called the FBI, and they made any reference to any other weapons being used. They had to tell them no. They made mention of knives. They had a moment to speak. I think the reporter from San Francisco felt that
Mrs. Hoagland, how old was your son, and what did he do?